Agile is about small, self-organizing teams guided by a clear outcome, listening, iterating, and course correcting. There are many ways to do this, many ways to be Agile. But at first, when a team is learning to be Agile, it's best to follow some recommended practices. To do Agile while the team works to fully absorb the Agile mindset. Let me show you a modification of the Scrum framework to help you do Agile while you learn to be Agile. We start with the product backlog. This list of features is ordered by priority and value and is already roughly sized. It's owned by the product owner role and is often managed in collaboration with the team. Teams work in 2-week iterations. Scrum calls these sprints. These iterations repeat continuously. A little trick teams often use is that they start and end iterations in the middle of the week, like a Tuesday and Wednesday. Since so many important practices happen at the start and end of iterations, it's best to pick days that are much less likely to bump into holidays and vacations. As you know, there are 3 main roles in Agile: the product owner, the iteration manager, which is known as the Scrum Master in Scrum, and the team members. These are the developers, testers, business analysts, and designers who work together in a sprint. There are 5 practices we'll be talking about which take place during an iteration. The first practice is iteration planning. In Scrum, this is known as sprint planning. About 2 iterations worth of this product backlog is kept in a state we call ready. This means the product owner and team members have discussed these top items, broken them into stories, added acceptance criteria, and sized them. This fine-grained detail is what makes them ready to be pulled by the team in this meeting. This backlog is also referred to as the funnel of work, and these first items are the first items that go into the funnel. Note that these are pulled by the team, not pushed onto the team. A team only takes what it thinks it can accomplish in the next iteration. Iteration planning usually takes at least 3 to 4 hours and is usually segmented into 2 parts. In part 1 of the iteration planning meeting, the team pulls the priority items from the product backlog and works on shared understanding with the product owner. They will confirm outcome details, acceptance criteria, past estimates, and decide whether the item will fit into the iteration. The goal of part 1 is a forecast of what they can do in the next iteration. This list is known as the iteration backlog. The team repeats this process by pulling items off the top of the product backlog, reviewing them with the product owner, and adding them to the iteration backlog. This is repeated until the team determines they have all the items they can complete in the next iteration. The team uses information like how many story points they were able to complete in past iterations, whether the iteration period has any vacations or days off, and they forecast how many of these top items they can accomplish in the coming iteration. Once the team has this forecast, they move on to part 2 of iteration planning. In part 2, the team then creates tasks for each of the stories. Team members will do this work in subgroups or individually, depending on how the work will be done. Often stories are worked on by more than one team member. The next practice is daily stand-ups. In Scrum, this is known as the daily Scrum. The iteration then continues with a daily stand-up each day. At some point during the iteration, the product owner will usually bring the whole team or representatives from the team to update the product backlog. This is another practice known as the backlog refinement meeting. Depending on how much needs to be done, this could happen weekly or only once per iteration. The team could also use this time to review any feedback from past iterations, which they will use to reevaluate any stories or features in the product backlog. At the end of the iteration, the team will meet with stakeholders and the product owner to go over what was accomplished during the iteration and solicit feedback. This practice is known as the showcase, also known as sprint review in Scrum. This often takes 1 to 2 hours. Often, right after this meeting, the team will do a retrospective to discuss ways they can get better as a team. Ultimately, the team will come up with a plan to improve on 1 or 2 areas that need improvement. These meetings should take up only about 15% of the work time of an iteration. Each of these rituals is time-boxed and clearly defined so that they don't go on too long. And that's the iteration cycle of an Agile team.